All right. Welcome to Campfire Football, everybody. I am Sebastian North. Let's get this going. So, we're going to just make sure that all the things are going. Sorry about the last one. If you happen to tune in, there was one person who did. If you did, I apologize. It kind of sucks when basically the internet starts getting weird, things start glitching. Hopefully, this one goes okay. So, we are going to talk about the Champions League because the new format has dropped. It's pretty exciting. This has been talked about for quite a while now. Actually, this all really started with the European Super League. It's kind of funny how things like this go. And though competitions are always sort of looking for tweaks and there are always changes, and we'll talk about that as well, when the European Super League came in, Florentino Perez was like, hey, we got to change football. It's got to modernize. Then it collapsed. There was this immediate need for UEFA to say, okay, what do we do to make sure that these big clubs, really the ones that are the big draw for all of this, how do we make sure that they're happy so that they don't go off and break into sort of their own European Super League thing? Like that was where the conversations really starts. For the last 4 or 5 years, people at UEFA, different people, they've been looking at different options for how to sort of just improve and change the competition. Partially because they want to shake it up and make it a little more interesting for the fans, but also they want it to generate more money. And this is where this format gives more games overall. If you are the winner of this competition, you will only play 2 more games than you did last year. So it's not like it packs the schedule for each individual club. It's not like it makes it insane, way too many more games. That's the Club World Cup next summer that you got to worry about. But digress. What I love about this is that it's a change because when I was growing up, sort of late 90s, early 2000s, the Champions League had a double group stage format. So there was a single group stage first there was first group stage, 8 groups, 4 teams, top 2 teams get out of the group and go into the second group phase where there would be 4 groups. And the top 2 from that would go on to the quarterfinal. And they had 2 legs and then they had a final. They haven't done a 2-legged final in I don't know how long. I mean, some of the format changes you can find in the European Cup from decades and decades ago. But overall, in the last 20 years, what I saw was that was a massive reduction of games, by the way. Going from 2 group phases where you play 6 games apiece and then you go to the quarterfinal, that's a lot more than what they do now and what they have been doing for quite a while. So, and that was pretty diabolical. I mean, you would get a lot of games that didn't matter, but there was really a lot of room for teams to show how good they were over the season. I think Leeds United back in the day where they were in the Champions League and they were in the semifinals, got knocked out by Valencia. I remember them beating Lazio away. It was actually Sven-Göran Eriksson, the end of Sven-Göran Eriksson at Lazio, rest in peace, my man, before he took over the England job. So it's kind of like, yeah, takes you back. But Leeds that time, they managed to get through 2 group phases and managed to move on. Just sort of my own memory of it. But what's really, really cool about this format is it is totally different. And I think the good thing is that with a lot of competitions, if you have a specific format that's been going for a long time, teams find ways to maneuver it as efficiently as possible, meaning they understand sort of, you just need a draw on the road, and if you get 2 of your wins at home and a draw on the road and you're able to take points off the specific team, you'll just make it through to the next round. And let's be clear here, there's a lot of people that have been complaining that this format is kind of bad, trash, whatever. I am going to tell you right now why I think it's great. So let's do it. Let's get into it. We're going to go over a couple articles. First one here is it's on ESPN, just kind of explains what this all is. And there's a few things that I think are important to touch on. So it's first time in 21 years that we've had a format change. And as I said, that was when they had 2 group stages. We now have 36 teams in the competition. They are all playing in a league. teams in positions 25 to 36 will be eliminated in January. The 16 teams in positions 9 through 24 will play a knockout phase playoffs in February to earn a place in the round of 16, and then the top 8 goes straight to the round of 16 played in March. You may look at that and go, oh my God, what, 9 through 24 are going to play some knockout phase playoffs? Well, it kind of already has been happening, right? So what you had, slightly differently, right? In the Champions League, specifically, you had the top 2 from the groups. They would just advance to the round of 16 or the quarterfinals, right? But here, so the teams that finished third would drop down into a playoff with the second place team of the groups in the Europa League, in the Europa League or the Conference League. So there was this other little playoff in between that would set up the following round. So this isn't a huge difference, but it is a good way to make sure that your league position matters and that you filter out teams. So if you take a look, here's the table, right? 25 through 36 are going to be eliminated. All of the ones in blue here are going to end up in they will do a knockout, and then you'll have the top 8 that get in. So that's part of the idea. How did seeding change? This is kind of interesting. A lot of people were saying, that I hear this all the time, by the way. Every time there is a format change, people always jump out and say, oh, it just benefits the bigger clubs. This does not. Let's be abundantly clear. This is way more interesting because in what is the group phase, or we'll call it the league phase now because that's what it is. In the league phase, you're going to get some big matchups. And so pot 1 used to be just like if you were in pot 1, you wouldn't play against another team from pot 1, right? If you were a top-seeded team, you wouldn't play against another top-seeded team in the group stage unless a high-level team ended up in the second-seeded group, so in the second pot. Here, though, pot 1 used to hold the holders of the Champions League, Europa League, plus champions of the top 6 domestic leagues. Pots 2 through 4 would then be ordered by strength based on UEFA's club coefficient. This is something that we've heard a lot about. So then you had these are the teams that were in pot 1, pot 2, pot 3, pot 4. Not much jumps out as like an issue. Maybe at Leti, or maybe because of how good Bayer Leverkusen were last season, you could see them here instead of RB Leipzig or maybe Borussia Dortmund. But overall, this is pretty standard for where you would put these teams, right? Now, Real Madrid, they're not just going to play against teams from these pots. They will also play against teams from pot 1. So they did the draw. I don't really want to get into how much the draw worked because, frankly, no one really cares. It's not that interesting. It's way more interesting to get into the things. This is all the theoretical stuff that they used to talk about, right? What is really cool is actually I just really like this. So Man City, they will play against Inter Milan at home. They will play PSG on the road. They will go back home, play against Bruges, Juventus on the road, Feyenoord at home, Sporting Lisbon away, Sparta Prague at home, Slovan Bratislava away. So you're like, oh, okay, well, they play like 3 or 4 teams that aren't very good. Yeah, but they have 2 big ones. And if you look around at some of the other heavy hitter matchups that we get, Arsenal will play against PSG and Inter as well. They will also have to play against Atalanta. We don't know how good Atalanta are going to be this season. They did just sell Toon Koopmeiners to Juventus. Liverpool will have Real Madrid at Anfield. They will also have Bayer Leverkusen at Anfield. They will have to go to Leipzig and to Milan. That's pretty tasty. Aston Villa, I mean, this is cool because it's the first time they've been in the Champions League for a long time. I think this is the first time in the Champions League proper. I think they definitely played in the European Cup back in the day, but not the Champions League. So this is their first time here. They will have Bayern Munich and Juventus at home. They'll have to go away. I think their schedule looks kind of nice because, despite these being difficult fixtures, they get young boys away on the plastic pitch. It's going to be annoying to see that in the Champions League. Real Madrid, this is great. Dortmund at home, Liverpool away, AC Milan at home. Barcelona, the Hansi Flick derby here. We're going to see Barcelona host Bayern Munich. They will also host Atalanta. Brest from France, who made a surprise run to the Champions League, similar to Villa. Atleti, this is great. They'll have PSG away, RB Leipzig and Bayer Leverkusen at home. Bayern Munich, PSG, Barcelona, Benfica, Bayer Leverkusen, Inter Milan, Liverpool, Atleti, AC Milan. My goodness. I mean, that's awesome. Dortmund, as we said, they will get Barcelona, Real Madrid, Inter Milan, Man City, Arsenal, Leverkusen, Leipzig. PSG, though. I mean, we'll get into everybody, but look at PSG. They've got Man City, Bayern Munich, Atleti, and Arsenal. I mean, let's be clear here. Yes, they play 8 games, so it's 2 more than they would have in the past. But this is incredible. Never in a sort of group stage preliminary phase of the Champions League would you have ever had PSG, Man City, Bayern Munich, and Atleti and Arsenal. I mean, first of all, it's 5 teams, but that would never have happened that those teams would face each other in those early rounds. And, I mean, who does not want to see this? Then PSG, think about this. They also have to go to PSV Eindhoven, or they'll have PSV Eindhoven at home. That's kind of more straightforward. They've got to go to Salzburg. They'll have Girona at home, Stuttgart away. So you get these interesting matchups with slightly smaller clubs, but you do get some big heavy hitters. I mean, they've got 4 of the biggest clubs in Europe, right? Teams that, Arsenal were Champions League finalists back in 2006, I think it was. But, I mean, Man City, recent Champions League winners. Bayern Munich, they are who they are. We know they won the Champions League in the COVID year. Atleti, finalists twice in a row in the last 10 years under Simeone. I mean, these are great. These are fantastic matchups. On top of that, the teams that are a little bit more, how do we say this? The teams that are sort of that mid-level and smaller, again, they get more opportunities. And I don't want to look at that giant table that has all of the matchups because it is just kind of crazy. My French team Lille, they're going to be fun to watch and interesting to pay attention to. But here's, like, for instance, one of the questions. Will the league phase be exciting? There have been some comments that the league phase could be quite dull, that there will be little to play for as the top 8 clubs will qualify directly to the round of 16, and the next 16 will all go into the knockout phase playoffs. We're only going to lose 12 teams out of 36 at the end of the league phase. Okay, so you don't lose that many teams, but as we said earlier, only the top group of teams will qualify directly for the round of 16. The others have to go into a playoff. You don't want to go into a 2-leg playoff where you might get bounced if you're one of the big teams. You want to get into that top 8. And you think to yourself, well, they're the top 8. They can easily do it. But the thing is, they're playing against each other. There's going to be so much stripping of points off of each other as the big teams that some will end up in a really precarious position. The league table we have put together after 7 rounds shows there should still be lots at stake heading into the final match day with only 24 points available to each team. The table won't be anywhere near as spread out as a domestic league. Indeed, it's possible for a club to move 7 or even 8 places on match day 8. So, of course, when you make a competition like this, especially nowadays, you go ahead and you use your analytics, you use the different models, computer models to really kind of build out what are the different possibilities, right? You simulate the competition a bunch of times in a computer. And what they found out was that after 7 rounds, 2 clubs were guaranteed top 8. 17 clubs were in contention for the 6 remaining top 8 spots. 17 clubs could get an automatic qualification on the last day. 17 clubs were guaranteed minimum of a place in the knockout phase. No club was completely locked in the knockout phase playoffs. No club was completely locked in the knockout phase playoffs. That means there's still the jeopardy of getting knocked out. 14 clubs were vying for the last 5 spots as 20th to 24th in the knockout phase playoffs, and only 3, 34th to 36, were already eliminated. Now, taking into account the number of matches and teams involved, 15 points will usually be enough to finish in the top 8, with 9 for a place in the top 24. There could be seasons where more points are required, and indeed in our mock, some did miss out on 15 points due to inferior goal difference. So, that all makes sense. But to try to make every game important through the final day, UEFA has linked a club's final league position to the knockout bracket, meaning where a club finishes affects their path. So the higher your place, the easier route based on your league ranking through to the final. For instance, the teams who finish in first and second cannot play each other until the final. Those who are third and fourth would avoid first and second until the semifinals, and so on. So from a seeding standpoint, is like if you do well, if you do really well, like finish in the top 4 of this 36-team league, you stand to gain actually a lot. You stand to be in a great position to move on. Now, that may say something, but let's say one of the big teams slightly underperforms, you may still have to face them. But here they're showing after 7 games what their Champions League mock table would look like. I mean, look at this. Real Madrid and Man City would be qualified, and at the very bottom you have Sparta Prague, Slovan Bratislava, and Sturm Graz that are eliminated. But everybody else is still alive, even 33rd Shakhtar Donetsk, because if they were to win, they would go up to 7 points, which would take them right into this region of the top 26, right? If you look a little higher in the table, we said top 8. Who can get in the top 8? Well, look at this, 14 points. 12th all the way up to 6th. There's just a 3-point gap. 19th to 8th, there's a 3-point gap. So basically, this is going to be exciting for a while. Now, we've seen in a lot of competitions just sort of the way that we've seen in a lot of competitions. Sorry, I had to change this. Pardon me. If you think about the World Cup, if you think about the Champions League in the past, there are very few games in the final 2 rounds that really have a lot of jeopardy. There's teams that, yes, they may be trying to vie for 3rd place to maybe get into the Europa League or the competition below. That's not super interesting, because then it becomes like if you don't care that much about the Europa League, then like why would you care about what happens in that final day of the group stage? Like you're not that worried about it. You're like, well, look, I mean, we already know who's qualified for the next round. That's it. It's fine. And I just think that it's a pretty interesting. It's going to be a lot, I think, this first season to wrap our heads around. But one of the things that I love about changing formats is the fact that when you do, it alters and shakes up the way that teams prioritize, the way teams strategize. And so right now, I will bet you that every team that knows who they're playing, they're going to look at when, and they're going to be like, okay, how do we prioritize this match? This is a very important away game. So they're going to start to, do their own little devious stuff. What is going on? Like, what do we have to do to put ourselves in the best position to get through? The thing is, there is no prior experience. There is no data for them to look at and go, oh, okay, so this is how you beat the Swiss model. That's a whole other thing, Swiss model. Apparently there's this guy who came up with this model. It feels he has the intellectual property to it, and he's suing UEFA at the moment, saying that this was his idea and they should give him the credit or money or the name or whatever, which I think is pretty funny. But I love this model because it is so different and no one can really predict anything. You finally don't have to worry about all these talking heads telling you exactly how you get through the competition. Everyone's just going to be looking at it going, well, I wonder how you do this. So, yeah, I love this. I really do. I think this is fantastic. We have to wait and see. And I think because there's so many teams and so many games, you kind of want to wait until this really flushes out where you have the exact schedule. I think that will be coming out this weekend, unless it already has. But I believe what they did was they did the draw and then the schedule in terms of what day all these games are going to happen. We'll see. But I am absolutely fascinated by this. I love it. It's not more packed than ever, but it's going to generate a ton of interest. And look, it's a good thing. This is the thing: these changes in football are a good thing. There's a lot that's been happening over the last couple of years that people are getting really, really up in arms about when it comes to different things, competition changes, format changes. For instance, in the League Cup, recently, they decided that they are going to sort of do a seeded draw where it's not just going to be random and you can't just get Man City, Chelsea, and the opening rounds of the League Cup. Well, there's people be like, oh, this is a disgrace. It just benefits the top teams. Yeah, well, you know what? If the EFL want the League Cup to make money, they need the top teams to be facing off in the semifinals of the competition. It's fun to see maybe Tranmere Rovers make a run and get there. But nobody really wants to see a cup final that is a League One or League Two side that scraped their way and playing against Man City, because it's not much of a contest. Everyone has a pretty good idea how it's going to go. And unless you get that wild upset, which they happen so rarely, it becomes more of a formality. The EFL know that if they're going to make money off the EFL Cup, the League Cup, they need the big boys to be playing in the finals. And the semifinals. That's what they need, because that's what's going to get the TV viewership. If the League Cup doesn't want the top teams to take more control of the competition, they should kick them out. If they kick out the top teams, they won't make as much money. It'll just be EFL teams, championship from below, or championship League One and League Two, and so it won't garner as much attention, won't make as much money. This is exactly why UEFA went with this format for the Champions League and the other two competitions. They wanted to earn more. Apparently, it's going to make something like, I think, 25 or 30 million more just based on the amount of games. And then you add all the content, and then you add all the extra stuff. Then you add more availability and more room for sponsors to come in and get on board. This is the kind of thing that's going to happen, and I think it's going to be fantastic. I really do. This is a necessary change, and it at least appeases the big clubs that were thinking Super League. It appeases them for a little while longer. We don't know who has any kind of advantage in this situation. And I think there's some teams that clearly got more difficult draws, but fine. The reason they're more difficult is because they play against bigger teams. They play more games against bigger teams in the league phase, and that is what we want. So, thank you for stopping by. I know this may have been a little bit leaf than you may have been thinking, and I didn't really spend too much time on the articles, but this is just the beginning. We will talk about this a lot more. I am all for this change.